President France. I'm going to turn it over now to our first speaker, who is President-elect of NACD, our National Association of Conservation Districts. President-elect Mr. Crowder is so kind to join us this morning. I certainly know of his work, and I'm always impressed and really excited to introduce him to our state leadership and directors, staff, and partners across the state, Mr. Crowder, who joined this morning. I also would like to make sure folks realize how kind-hearted he is, because he is with soil and water districts at a local level, just like you, and actually in Washington State. So the time difference has meant he has gotten up extra early to join us. Mr. Crowder, thank you again. I am giving the virtual floor over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Kendall. Can you hear me okay now?
Absolutely.
I wanted to just pre-apologize to everybody here. I've got a pretty good cold, and I was telling Kendall on our time coming in here that I've never been so happy to get a cold, because I got a negative COVID test this morning. So I was happy to just have a cold. So I apologize for the way I sound this morning, but thank you for having me. It's NACD's 75th year this year, and we're excited to keep going what we're doing. You know, it's been a struggle. Everybody's going to talk about it's a struggle, but everybody here has got through it, and we're going to keep getting through it and keep getting our work done and be as positive as we can. We've actually had a pretty decent year with NACD. Our staff is used to the current conditions, and we're plugging along. One thing I will say, and hopefully this will come up sometime later in the meeting, but our annual meeting is in February, and it's $50 a person. It will never be cheaper than this year to go. You can participate in all the meetings and all the educational breakouts. So I highly encourage you to attend that. One thing I will note, that as one of your fellow conservationists, Barry Hamilton from King George, Virginia, passed from COVID last week. So good friend of mine, good friend of conservation, and just keep everybody in your thoughts and their families that we've lost, and let's just keep plugging along. So the first two people that I would like to recognize is Steve Meeks and John Peterson. I see them all the time at a national level, and I just want Virginia to know how well represented you are at NACD and legislative committee. John and Stephen are good players, they're good partners, and I just wanted to give a shout out to them. And then they contribute a lot to my legislative committee and others. So Candace, she is our Southeast region rep. And if you've never been on a Southeast region call, I'm always amazed at how efficient they are. If you have attended some of the other region meetings, I'll be kind and say they're not as good as the Southeast region meeting. So you guys are rock stars for that. Virginia is a state with 100% district paying dues. So that's wonderful. Again, that's not in every region or every state. So thank you again for that. I take over as president in February, and I can't be more honored. I'm literally just a normal farm kid from Indiana that didn't have enough land in the family to farm. So I went to college for 7 years and got 3 degrees and went to the West and farmed. So I can show you how smart I am. I still do that and still love it and do it every day. I live and breathe conservation on my own farm, and love to tour and see what's happening over the US and promote that and bang that drum for what everybody on this call does. So got some updates from the legislative work. Obviously, there's going to be a change in administration. Barring what happens today, there's going to be a change in administration coming up, and looks like there's going to be a change in priorities. So carbon markets, environmental work, we're going to be working on all kinds of different stuff with the new administrations. And I'm a liaison to the EPA. So we have our tentacles of NACD out to make sure that we're well represented and we can shape what's best for farmers and producers and landowners. The Southeast region meeting, I was asked to say the Southeast region meeting will be in Gulf Shores on August 8 through 10. Again, we're going to assume after July that we'll be back in session. NACD is planning an in-person meeting in July. That is our true 75th anniversary. So we're going to be positive and say we're going to be in person. After that, you know, who knows? Hopefully we'll do that. The grants, urban ag grants, they're February 15th through the 21st is when, or excuse me, February 15th, 21 is when they are due. And then technical assistance grants, their next round will be coming soon. And Virginia is well represented with both of those grants. And maybe Kendall sometime through this will be able to update everybody on the different grants and the leadership possibilities that NACD provides. So I've used my time. I'm happy to go any further, but with 5 minutes, I don't want to go over my time, Kendall. So if there's any questions I can answer or anything I can add to the group.
So I do have a little bit of feedback there. If folks can remain muted for me. I do have one question that was sent directly to me. Can you speak a little bit more about how the NACD meeting is going virtual and the opportunity our districts have to join?
Sure. Yeah, our website is nacdnet.org. And if you go in there, there's a tab for the annual meeting. And we're actually recording breakout sessions and region meetings early so we can make it form into so we don't have technical difficulties. But the registration fee is usually quite high because it takes a lot of money to rent places, as everybody here knows. But for $50, we're basically all we're doing is covering the company that's putting this all together, because it's not Zoom. With a couple of thousand people, you can't really do Zoom. So we're just trying to cover our expenses and expose as many people as possible as we can to what we do at NACD in the educational breakout. So it'll be very similar as far as meeting wise. We just won't have the in-person tours and other hallway talk like you have. And everybody here misses that, and we're going to love it in the future. I would say Virginia will be just like every other state at NACD. We've learned from this. We've learned that we could be more efficient in some of our meetings with some less travel, but we'll never replace in-person meetings.
Absolutely, I appreciate that. I believe we have Candace Avenanti on the line, also our Southeast region rep, in case she wanted to add anything, or if she can help me as I'm doing multiple things here. I do see a question of, can we post the website here for the conference? Thank you so much, Candace. You knew my question. The website to register for the NACD annual meeting is now in the chat box for folks to follow. I think one of Mr. Crowder's big points is that with the registration being $50 this year, it opens a lot of opportunity for districts to be able to plug into a training opportunity that sometimes can be restrictive of our budgets when we have to travel. While it certainly won't replace an in-person conference and the conversations we usually get to have, it certainly is a valuable alternative that I hope our districts in Virginia will consider. I also had a direct question to me if perhaps a little bit more detail can be offered on what those TA grants are. I know for folks who might be interested in this opportunity, I'm happy to talk offline and even connect you with Thomas Jefferson Soil and Water District. They actually were the recipient of this grant this past year and is the first district in Virginia to receive these grant opportunities. So with that, is there any additional information maybe you can share on that front?
Well, Candace can, and I can hit the highlights, but those would be submitted through Candace. But we work with the NRCS, so it's quite a bit of money. It's nearly $10 million a year that we pass through for the NRCS for equip work and others that NRCS prioritizes. So we're basically helping put boots on the ground just to be able to finish up the main priority program work. So those go through NACD, and then we go through a selection process, and those are, I don't know the exact date that they're coming out, but they'll come out real soon for the next round of funding.
Thank you so much, Mr. Crowder. I will work with Candace, and I will be sure to share that information with our all district listserv also. If you are not a member of our all district listserv, Shannon Mitchum in our office can post some details on how to subscribe to that email listserv in the chat box during our meeting today. But that's a mailing list that we certainly want you to be a part of, because we certainly share information that is of relevance to our districts and certainly pass along NACD news and information. I think go ahead, I'm sorry.
And NACD's e-resource comes out every Tuesday, and it has a lot of information so you don't miss these deadlines, and it gives really good descriptions of the grants, and not just grants, but all the leadership opportunities we have. And there is a lot for whatever level you're at. There is a lot of information and training opportunities. Next Generation Leadership Program is fantastic. We're just finishing up our first cohort, and we'll be working on our second one coming up here in the near future. So very excited about that. We work with Envirothon and others. So we take our leadership very seriously, and I know Virginia has participated in the Envirothon program as well. So thank you.
Absolutely. Our Envirothon program is certainly a flagship of us. We like to think of ourselves as a powerhouse in the program, and Bonnie Mall and ourselves helps lead that program also, and connections with some of those key partners also, like Smithfield Foods. I have one direct note to me also that perhaps I should give a little bit additional background to Mr. Crowder. We had so many elected directors on our ballot last November, year before, that started, and then immediately we had a pandemic, so didn't attend so many in-person meetings and are still on a learning curve themselves. So to the direct message I have is NACD, much like our association and state. Yes, our national association is a lot like your Virginia association and our staff. We represent you in Virginia at the association level, at our General Assembly, offer those programs like Envirothon. Your national association is doing that type of representation for you on Capitol Hill. So if I apologize if I didn't clarify a little bit of how our roles work with our national association, and I hope some of the program overview shows how critically important that entire partnership and hierarchy is, but also goes back to understanding. I think someone asked me, our NACD rep is actually one of our members at the local level. It's Stephen Meeks. He's not a hire of NACD by any means, just like Mr. Crowder is a locally led conservationist also in his own area. Are there other questions for Mr. Crowder? Thank you, Shannon. I did see you just drop in the chat box. For folks who are not a member of our all district listserv, she provided the information on how to sign up for that. To subscribe or unsubscribe to our all district and partner email list, you can send an email message to the email address she's dropped there with the word subscribe as the subject line. In the event you ever need to change your email address, just click unsubscribe, send it in that subject line, and then subscribe with your new email address. So certainly I hope you'll sign up and receive information not only from your state association, but NACD that we often share through that listserv. Last chance for questions for Mr. Crowder. Thank you, Candace, for helping with some of those extra questions we had on the NACD technical assistance grants. And I see some of you direct messaging me, so I'll certainly follow up with you one-on-one, but you can learn more about the grant program at the website Candace just dropped in your chat box. Funding is for staffing and boots on the ground for supporting the EQIP and CSP programs and conservation planning. I appreciate the information about anticipating an RFP for new applicants around April, and we'll certainly share that again through that all district listserv that was just mentioned. I appreciate your updates and comments, Mr. Crowder, and know you need to split on us to get to work, and really appreciate you getting up early to help us.
Yeah, it's not daylight. I'll hang around a bit. We got a while to daylight, so thank you.
I appreciate it. I hope you'll stay on the line. Certainly, if we wrap up at the end and still have some remaining questions and Mr. Crowder is still with us, we'll circle back for all our speakers, but hopefully Candace Abenani, our Southeast Region rep with NACD, might be able to linger on the line too, just in case anything comes up and Mr. Crowder does have to go. with that, I'm going to shift to our next speaker, who is Dr. Edwin Martinez. He is our new state conservationist with NRCS, who started in Virginia in September timeframe. And I make sure we have a lot of the technology piece here. If Dr. Martinez, perfect. I think you should all be seeing his slideshow up on your screen, and really appreciate that you can join us today. I have mentioned to you how we miss our in-person events and our annual meeting that we would have held at the Hotel Roanoke, when we would have been able to have you as a keynote speaker to really introduce yourself, your background, welcome you to Virginia, and really have an in-depth conversation with you about where we can head together as a partnership with NRCS in Virginia. We're really excited about your leadership and appreciate your comments today. So with that, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Kendall. I appreciate it, and I appreciate the opportunity to join you all this morning. Edwin Martinez, I'm the new state conservationist here in Virginia. I've been on the job for about close to 4 months, so still learning a lot, learning about our partners and learning about our landowners, our programs, etc. A little bit about myself. I come from the Washington, D.C. area, where I used to manage the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, an initiative that works from New York to Minnesota to keep all the Great Lakes water quality improved and in good quality, working with Canada and the U.S. It's a conservation initiative that is one of the biggest one targeting the Great Lakes, and the Great Lakes has about 20% of the total fresh water in the world, so they have a lot of importance, and the agency was working with multiple local, state, and national partners to do this initiative. Before that, I worked for many years in Michigan as a district conservationist and also as an assistant state conservationist for field operations in the northern part of the state and the Upper Peninsula. Really happy to be here, and Happy New Year to everybody, and thanks for the opportunity. A few updates regarding NRCS, and I hope that you can see my screen. One of them that I wanted to take this opportunity briefly is the direct hire. As you may see in here, there's a lot of information in my slides, and the slides could be sent out so that you can actually take time and review them. So I'm going to be really short per slide, but this is some of the newest news that we have. So we have the ability to do direct hire. We have that authority recently for NRCS, and there's multiple positions. We have soil conservationist technicians, engineering technicians, forester, soil conservationist, archaeologist, agronomist, an engineer, and natural resource specialist. Some of these jobs came open on December 23rd, and they will be open all the way until July 15 or until we select someone. The main thing with direct hiring is that NRCS has the ability to select staff members or team members that are highly qualified individuals and hire them on the spot. So if any of the partners on the call have interested candidates or highly qualified candidates, that you have resumes and you are confident that they will do a really great job regarding any of these positions, feel free to share that information with me, and also encourage those individuals to apply via USA Jobs. This is a really unique opportunity because if we have someone that is highly qualified, we can hire them on the spot. We want to increase the agency cap. So basically, this is to hire new talent coming to the agency. Other updates regarding staffing, we have a district conservationist that is being currently hired for the Quinton and also Fredericksburg offices. And eventually we will be advertising the district conservationist in the Cortland office. This is a slide just to show you the two-pager document that we put together to summarize NRCS accomplishments. And this is FY20 and in general, what we have done as an agency. It's a really it's heavy on information and numbers. I can send this document as well, separate to Dr. Kendall, and she can share it with everybody on the call today. But what I wanted to highlight is just a few of the main items. In general, what we have here in Virginia is about 2,414 active contracts currently. That will be over $131 million on funding for EQIP, CSP, and RCPP, covering about 518,000 acres in the state. On FY20 specific, we obligated over $24.6 million of funding over 441 contracts. Many of them were targeting water quality. Top conservation practices, I wanted to highlight some of them that regards, this is the top or the most common conservation practices that we fund, including waste storage facility system, water facilities, and others that will be part of a grazing system and other practices like that. So I wanted to highlight some of that regarding water quality. I will send out the 2-pager that we put together that has the accomplishments that the agency has had from 2010 until now, and obviously FY20 specifically. Farm Bill programs, this is looking into the future, FY20, right now where we are. So for FY20, we received about $23.3 million for funding for EQIP. We had a sign up for this program, and the sign up closed in December, and we received about 1,200 applications for us to do the evaluation and then ranking and then funding. And just to confirm, can everybody hear me well? Okay, perfect. We set aside about $300,000 for CIG. For EQIP, not for EQIP, for CSB, we received about $10.2 million in Farm Bill program funding, and we will be funding many applications for CSB as well. Our CPP 5 proposals were received or submitted to us, so we're hoping that we get a few RCPPs this year here in Virginia, really interesting proposals. ASIP, over $1.4 million were allocated for this program, and then in regarding programs deadlines, we're still working on the ASIP, CSB Classic, and CIG proposals deadlines, but we will keep you up to date when we have a final one. Technical training, and this is what I would like to highlight in here, is how we as an agency are a core conservation agency and primary because the technical skills that our staff has. This is really important to highlight that in FY20, many trainings were offered, even though we have COVID and many issues that we were not able to meet on site or do any specific trainings in person. We were able to target a significant amount of audience, not only NRCS staff members, but also our partners. And that's really critical because we play a really critical role together. There was a lot of joint agency partners events as well, about 14, and targeting about 1,500 participants. Soil health, another big item that we also try to highlight on every opportunity that we have. The program was kicked off in 2013, and since then it has progressed significantly. We're moving into the new soil health plan that was written in May 2020. It has a lot of great information, including information on innovative staff and capacity building. That's critical, especially for the soil health area, and many other aspects of the soil health here in Virginia. The plan is well written, has a lot of great approaches to it, and we're looking forward to the implementation of that plan. And then we have 2 new Virginia Soil Health Partnership, 2 grants that were recently granted. I wanted to show just partnership agreements briefly, and it's just to give you an idea of how NRCS, working with partners, have the ability to target conservation to address many resource concerns, including water quality. Many of the conservation districts here and around the nation may have had already multiple agreements working with NRCS to do different things. Within the Great Lakes region, that's an example that I will mention because I worked in that region. There's agreements from demonstration farms, agreements to reduce phosphorus reductions, agreements to provide technical assistance, agreements to support capacity and staffing. There's a lot of opportunities that we have. So this list has some of the agreements that we have in Virginia with partners, but this could be extended in the future. Looking into the future, so there's a lot of things that we're currently doing in here, but there's also opportunity for us to continue to do new and innovation within the state. So we would like to evaluate the benefits of more demonstration farms, leading to showcase conservation practices that will improve water quality within the state. This is a really, really critical aspect of showcasing conservation, of education, and outreach. I have mentioned before how these have worked really greatly in the Great Lakes region, having demonstration farms all the way from New York to Minnesota, and we can compare the different soil conditions, the different crops, the different practices, different water quality parameters, etc. Also explore opportunities to implement a soil health project similar to what we had in the Great Lakes region, that is just making a connection between water quality and soil health. So those conservation practices that we have on site, we work with USGS, we do evaluation of the site's conditions, we implement the conservation practices, and we see how effective those practices are. And it allows and helps us to do making decisions on what practices should be improved, the standards, the specifications, and how we can use them more effectively, especially targeting water quality practices within the Chesapeake Bay. Edge of the field monitoring, this is nothing new for the team in here, but that's something that is really big within the Great Lakes Basin, goes back to the demonstration farm, goes back to outreach and education and implementation of conservation practices within the different locations. Here, this is just to showcase some of the work and the benefits of edge of field monitoring. These are sites, and the pictures are from the Great Lakes Basin where I used to work. But just to highlight that demonstration farm, edge of the field monitoring, and in addition to that is a partnership that has been developed. In this case, with different universities, with different local conservation districts, with NRCS, and also other federal partners. In this case, will be USGS, will be NOAA, will be NRCS, and EPA. This is to show you one of the projects that I'm working with our national team. These two maps have two different conservation practices. The one on my left has waste storage facilities, and the one on my right has grass waterways within the Chesapeake Bay Basin. So this is at the Hog 12 area, and what you see here is how from 2010 to 2020, we have a progression of implementation of these practices. Obviously, I'm new into the state, so I cannot speak about a specific critical watersheds that we have right now. So my knowledge is limited in that area, but you can see some of the locations that may have really increase on the waste storage facility practice and also an increase on grass waterways. Both practices target water quality and have multiple benefits for the environment and also for nutrient management, economical benefits in addition to the environmental benefits. But what I wanted to show you is just two examples of what we will be working with the National Office to do a display of many different conservation practices based on how we have progressed on doing implementation. So it just shows from 0 practices all the way to X amount of practices within a specific Hog 12 watershed. Some of the success stories, and I would like to highlight, many of you may know a lot of these landowners. I have not met any of them yet because I'm new in the state. I'm looking forward to do so, but there's the stewards of the land, our landowners that we work here in Virginia. There's a lot of different success stories that we have been working with our public affairs specialists and other team members to highlight in regards to the implementation of conservation, outreach, education, how these landowners have found ways to utilize farm bill conservation programs into their farms for better financial and economical scenarios, to improve water quality, to improve their farm in general, and to be able to outreach and provide education out there to other landowners. This is the Sweetbriar College that we have developed a conservation plan working with them. I recently met with them. The conservation plan was written some years ago, and they're looking into the implementation of this conservation plan primarily for water quality purposes. They may have some soil health work performed in their farm as well, which we wanted just to highlight this briefly. This is another example of a success story. This is another grower that has high seasonal tunnels to expand the growing season in his farm for production. So, you know, from big scale to small scale farmers, we have been able to work hand in hand to do implementation of conservation practices, and not only to do that, but also to improve their operations on farms around the nation. I say around the nation because a previous initiative that I worked was a national initiative, but now referring to Virginia as a state. And those are some of the highlights that I wanted to provide this morning. If there's any questions, I will be more than happy to do so, to address them now or at the end of the session. Once again, Dr. Kendall, thank you so much for the opportunity to join this morning.
Absolutely, Dr. Martinez. We've got a few minutes before we need to move on to our next speaker. So I do have one question that was directly submitted to me. How can we continue to improve coordination and data sharing to ensure we are reaching our Bay goals? I know you may have covered that a little bit, but can you elaborate a bit more?
Yeah, so currently we have an agreement that is in place with DCR and NRCS to do that type of coordination. The agreement was signed last year, and we're currently working on the strategic plan to do the implementation. Primary will be a coordination between these federal agency and state agency to coordinate and work directly with landowners and do more than anything education to understand what are the benefits of having those conservation practices that were installed in certain locations to actually target or do the calculations for the Bay. An example that I will use is within the Great Lakes region, the main target goal for us as an agency and the other 16 federal agencies to receive funding was phosphorus reduction. So we needed to provide every year a report to Congress and the President showcasing how in the Great Lakes Basin we were reducing phosphorus by implementation of conservation practices and anything else that will target phosphorus reduction. So we needed to work hand in hand with landowners for them to understand what benefits those conservation practices had, not only the financial component, but also the environmental component, making a relationship between the implementation and ecosystem services. And that's something that we need to work more to be able to provide that information to landowners and others. So the outreach and education component of the agreement that we have will be critical. Once we can get that information and that agreement in place and implementation, we will work with our national office and should be able to provide some of that information regarding outcomes to the Bay. So I'm looking forward. It's really interesting, that question, because I was doing all the calculations in the national office, working with Texas, working with DC, and working with the 8 Great Lakes states to do the estimates of phosphorus reductions, nutrient reductions, carbon sequestration, and other practices, wildlife habitat, invasive species, acres, etc. So there is a lot of strategic planning that has been developed and methodology to do showcase outcomes within the Great Lakes Basin, and hopefully we can implement some of that within the Chesapeake Bay. Hopefully that addressed the question.
I think that's helpful. I'm trying to manage both the chat box and direct messaging too. I don't believe we have any other questions at this time, but certainly we have another moment or two if anybody wants to come off mute and ask a question, or we can circle back at the end if time permits. If Dr. Martinez, you can continue to stay on with us.
Thank you so much. I will be here.
Perfect. At this time, in the interest of time, then we'll move on to our third panelist, Director Dave Paylor. Many of you know Director David Paylor with the Department of Environmental Quality. It is always a joy to have you join our group. There is such appreciation with our programming and DEQ for us to try to help build that partnership and improve our efforts together. We greatly appreciate that not only is DEQ a huge supporter of our VCAP program and certainly become a big staple of our soil and water district efforts, but we also want to put in a plug right now, Mr. Paylor, because a lot of your team has been helping us to develop another training session later this month on January 20th about the Ag BNP loan program. Better understanding of the changes that happened at the recent Water Control Board, and also providing some details to our field staff about the program and how we can best market it. So if you haven't heard about that training session, you can register on our website just like you did for today's, but that will certainly be an important one for folks in the field. Director Paylor, I am happy to turn the floor over to you and ask for your comments. And in true district fashion, I see already questions rolling into the chat box for you.
Thanks, Kendall. It's always a pleasure to be with you. Maybe we should skip my comments and go straight to questions. I'll try to keep my comments brief. You know, it has, as everybody knows, it's been quite a year. We've been more successful than I ever could have imagined, with about 95% remote working, teleworking, and that sort of thing. So, you know, and we have managed to get back in the field and by and large keep our staff safe. So that's been a great thing. You know, one of the, well, let me start with a few of the details and then I'll go to some of the other overview. You mentioned the Ag B&P loan program, Kendall, and I just, and maybe the main thing I wanted to reinforce also was that we are presenting changes to the loan guidance set of January 20th. Virginia Soil and Water Conservation District virtual training blitz is what I have written here. But I've gotten, I think one of the questions I got most recently was what takes so long. Hopefully we're doing better with that now. We have received 142 applications. We've authorized almost $17 million worth of 0% interest loans. We've closed on 29 of them for just under $6 million. And as I think many of you know, we've posted some new guidance that is going to change some eligibility, added the districts as eligible applicants, made our B&P table consistent with the Agriculture and Consumer Services practices, added 4 new practices. We've reduced the minimum load amount and increased the maximum loan amount. We've actually been able to add a staff and done some mapping and some things to try to speed up applications. So anyway, I would just encourage you to participate in that training event on the 20th to get more about that, because I know that it's an area of a lot of interest. I think some of you know that we, after a fairly long process with stakeholders and so forth, took a poultry waste management general permit to the State Water Control Board in December. It was approved, not without a little bit of controversy over some reporting requirements and things like that. We did, based on public comments, scale back some of the reporting requirements out of some of the concerns that we saw that were raised about confidentiality and farm security and things like that. So hopefully that moved in the right direction. That final regulation looks like it will be effective on February the 17th. So that's where that is. Had a couple of bills last year. One of them, House Bill 1310, some concerns about excavated fill, and I think beginning just on January the 1st, new construction stormwater coverage requires DEQ to be informed about the source of excavated materials that are being applied. There's been some concern raised about what kind of material is being moved to certain sites, and so a little bit more transparency there. And then I guess I'll just say, I'll say that one of our big issues this year has been looking at environmental justice concerns. Many of you may know that we spent a year with a consultant looking for some recommendations for DEQ's practices with environmental justice. A whole lot of environmental justice seems to focus on siting issues. That report and our initial responses to that report should be on our website if you're interested. I won't go into a lot of detail other than to say that one of the things that I'm in the process of right now is recruiting an environmental justice director who is going to be charged with helping us to maybe look at all of our programs and the laws that we have and that sort of thing, and see where there are areas that we can increase transparency, and understanding on the part of the public about what's going on. I will say we've got 4 pieces of legislation that we're we got 4 pieces of legislation that we are going to advance this year. One of them is focused on environmental justice a little bit, and that is to require outreach of permit applicants to the public as part of a permit application, so that the public becomes aware of what's being proposed sooner rather than later. We have a piece of legislation that is going to try to look at efficiency of water systems when someone applies for a water withdrawal permit, that they, as part of that, do an audit about how tight their system is. There are a number of water systems out there that maybe lose 25% of their water before from point of withdrawal to point of delivery, and that's and so we're going to try to see if we can encourage addressing some of that. We've got we're going to ask for the authority to develop a regulation to collect information to help us expand our inventory of greenhouse gas issues in the Commonwealth. And then there's legislation to try to help raise some fees in the solid waste program, as well as for water withdrawal programs. And so I won't go into the details of that, other than to say that that those are out there, and if you have questions about them, we'd be happy to address them. We're a little bit late being able to get them out for stakeholder review, but they're out now. So with that, I'll take questions now or later. Are you on mute?
I am. Thank you. Thank you so much. We've got a few questions that have been dropped in the chat box. The first from Frank Johnson, a director in Northern Neck Soil and Water. What is the status of the proposed landfill in Cumberland County?
Yeah, I believe just recently, you know, landfill permits have 2 parts. One of them is a part A and a part B. One of them is siting and the other is design. The siting one actually is the one that probably takes the most time. We have only within the last few weeks gotten all of the information that is needed to form a complete application. And so we are beginning the review of that now. In general, you know, solid waste landfill permits have a longer time trajectory than what you're used to with other permits, and it is likely that we're a year and a half out from getting to a final decision on that part A piece. But we're right now we're in the process of reviewing what is finally a complete application.
And certainly we have one more question in the chat box at this time that I see. A few more maybe dropping in. Frida Cathcart, a new director from Blue Ridge Soil and Water. Certainly Mountain Valley Pipeline is on the mind of a number of our district directors. Is DEQ going to use the stop work statute to address the systemic problems caused by Mountain Valley failures of their erosion and sediment controls?
The stop work order authority, and Ms. Cathcart has heard our answer to this question before. The stop work authority is not focused on the pipeline as a whole, but is focused on, you know, authority when certain areas of the spread have failed to meet their technical requirements, and there's an imminent hazard, and in that case, we can have a stop work order on that particular section until it's fixed. We have people out in the field all of the time. We have used that authority several times. That authority does not give us, does not extend to stopping the entire project, which is a thing that we are hearing some people ask for.
Absolutely. Thank you for the update. We've got a few more minutes before we need to move on to our next speaker, Director Cristman. So if folks want to come off mute for me and potentially ask questions directly to Dave Paylor, that's fine too. I think we've addressed those that are in the chat box and direct message to me at this time. Trying to see if there's anybody with a hand raised. Did I see
Kendall? Yeah, I've got one. Director Paylor, Kyle Shreve with the
Hey, Kyle.
Virginia Agribusiness Council.
Yeah, how are you?
Thanks for your work on the, and you and your staff on the Ag BMP loan program changes. We appreciate you working with us and our partner organizations like Farm Bureau on it. One of the concerns I have is that, you know, as we've had very good response to cost share dollars this past year, but as the pandemic goes, I'm worried that producers are going to get more and more conservative with revenue. And so I'm hoping that that will spur more interest in the Ag BMP loan program to help get the dollars on the ground first, because they're not going to be able to have the excess funds to wait for the cost share to be reimbursed when after the project is over. How can we increase some coordination between DEQ and DCR to make sure that they're approved for cost share dollars and then BMP loan program so that we get more practices on the ground this year?
Well, it's a great question, and I don't know that I have you know, specific suggestions, but I would love to hear yours. Clyde and I are happy to work together to make things more efficient. This is good for agriculture. It's good for natural resources. We do not want to be a barrier to these good things getting done. So I guess what I would just do is invite you to give me a call, and you know, we'll get the right people together to talk and think about you know, what can we do to make it even better.
Thank you, sir. Happy to, as always.
Thank you, Director Paylor. I think that's a conversation not only Kyle, but certainly is of importance to our districts too, and our membership overlaps so much. So I take that as an open invitation for all of us to work on that effort.
Absolutely.
Thank you. All right, last chance for any questions for Director Paylor at this time. Director Paylor, I hope you can stay on.
Actually, I have one. Following up on the technical, this is Frida Cathcart. I just posted a link to a video in the chat. I've been reporting a hole in MVP's super silt fence since June 2020. I went there on New Year's Day, and it's still there. And it's it has where it creates an erosion sediment control problem that goes into the habitat for the endangered fish. So I was wondering, what is the DEQ doing? And I've sent photographs, videos, and reports to DEQ about this.
Of course, the only detail that I have right now is that every time I receive complaints from you or from others, is I confer with our folks in the field, and they have somebody out there. I do not have in my head right now exactly what the instance for that particular issue is, but I can assure you that we are following up on all of those, and that's probably the best I can offer at this point.
Director Paylor, I appreciate that. I can certainly help if that conversation needs to continue further offline. We've got about 10:52 right now, and so that we ensure we give enough time to our final presenter and questions that certainly are relevant for our Department of Conservation and Recreation, I'm going to shift and toss the virtual floor over to Director Clyde Cristman, who I know many of you know and have worked with over the years. We are so appreciative you were able to join this morning. I am stalling a little bit because I'm trying to pull your slides up, sir. So if you have 1 minute.
That's why I'm letting you pull my slides up so that I'm not stalling. So, well, thank you, Dr. Tyree, and it's great to see everybody. I was just reflecting as I was listening to Director Paylor. This is my seventh year doing these partner reports. Only normally it's in December and normally it's in person. I want to certainly welcome Michael Crowder and Dr. Martinez. I look forward to maybe next year we can sit on the stage together like we normally do and do this in a more interactive approach. But it's always great to be here. It's hard to believe that this is the seventh time I've done this. I'm finishing my seventh year at DCR and going on the eighth, and seems like just yesterday, but time flies. But I think that the most important thing that you probably all want to hear from me, and before I go further too, I also want to recognize, I usually like to start out by recognizing all the DCR staff. There are so many on this call. I just want to recognize them collectively. I'm very privileged to have a fantastic staff. And as a matter of fact, if you guys have any questions, I'm sure I'll be deferring to some of my experts that are here with us. So, but thank you to all the DCR staff that have joined us today. So all things budget. So Kendall, if you go on to the next slide, I'm going to talk about some of our water quality and resilience budget priorities. First of all, the next slide, if you we're sort of paying attention to the Water Quality Improvement Fund deposit. We had a total of $30,350,000 that was reserved for the Water Quality Improvement Fund back in August. And interestingly enough, normally the big driver in the Water Quality Improvement Fund deposit is excess state revenue above the official general fund forecast. This year, because of COVID and the changes to the forecast, there was $0 in that Part A deposit. However, because of the spending freeze that was imposed by the governor back in March, a lot of state agencies had substantial unobligated balances on hand, which is the Part B, the second part of the Water Quality Improvement Fund deposit, which this year totaled over $30.3 million. So rather unique in that this year, that was our big source of funding, was the 10% of the unobligated agency balances. The other thing that I'll mention too about the budget that the governor submitted to the General Assembly back on December 16th, that is before the General Assembly session, this will be the fourth time that the General Assembly has amended the same budget. And it has gotten a little confusing at times. And I think now, hopefully with this introduced budget, it's a little clearer. And we'll see what the General Assembly does. I know that there's some hope with the General Assembly that they're going to be able to wrap this session up at even shorter than normal. So we'll see how that works out. But first of all, with the $30.3 million, as is normal, there's certain carve-outs, if you will, that come off the top of the fund. Some of these you'll recognize because they are fairly normal. And then there's a couple new ones that I'll touch on a little bit more. First of all, we have $500,000, Dr. Martinez, that's available for matching federal CREP funding. We have been making good use of those funds over the last few years. A couple of years ago, I can remember that CREP funding being undersubscribed, but we have not had that problem recently. And also, most important to the association is the VCAP program. So there's $500,000 recommended there. Also, there's $1 million that's set aside for special non-point reduction projects. And as you'll recall, sort of a repeat of what we were doing last year and focusing on providing funding for RMP program, for poultry litter transport, and also for nutrient management planning. And so we have $1 million reserved there. I want to congratulate Daryl for an initiative that he brought forward, our small farm outreach program, working in partnership with Virginia State University. And there's $250,000 that had been set aside for that. And Daryl is certainly available and online to answer any more specific questions. But this is Daryl's creativity. He pitched the idea to me. I thought it was a great idea, and we pitched it up to the governor's office, and they loved it too. So I think, Daryl, we actually started out asking for a more modest amount than what we got there. So there's some new money in the budget, $500,000 for the Department of Forestry, specifically to support the Virginia Trees for Clean Water program. The target of this is on lands owned or managed by state agencies, public institutions of higher learning, as well as for community and nonprofit projects. And this really, the focus here is in the Chesapeake Bay WIP. You know, there's a really important component that we're sort of falling behind on in planting trees and riparian buffers. And so these funds will be prioritized for tree planting projects on state lands, but also used to produce tree seedlings and also for community and nonprofit tree planting projects, as I mentioned. And these grant funds will be made available through the Department of Forestry on a 50-50 match basis. I don't think I saw anybody from the Department of Forestry on the call today, but if we need more information about this, I'm sure we can get more information from them. Of course, the continuing of the support that we've given to the Department of Forestry of $250,000 for silvicultural programs. And there is language that requires the Department of Forestry to provide a report for both of these initiatives and how the funds are used. Another new initiative in this budget is the Clean Water Financing and Assistance Program. And I'd certainly be happy to defer to Director Paylor if there's any specific questions about this. But basically this is a pay for documented performance pilot program that will incentivize contracting and construction of innovative nutrient removal technologies. And funding is specifically, one target is supporting bioreactors in the Shenandoah Valley to address legacy nitrogen in groundwater. And of course, all this is tied to our phase 3 WIP goals. And again, you know, if there's additional questions, Director Paylor might be able to provide some additional information on this new initiative. Also, as you all know, in the Chesapeake Bay WIP, and one of the challenges that we have continued to face is the issue of failing septic systems. And so there's $100,000 in here to support the Department of Health working with the Virginia Institute of Marine Science to collaborate, document, map on-site and community septic system hotspots that are failing. As you know, when these systems fail, a lot of times people don't know they failed until long after they failed. So this initiative is really looking on trying to come up with some strategies and some long-term efforts to be able to inventory on-site systems, which is something that Department of Health has been working on and looking for solutions to this problem that's going to continue to face us in the coming years. And then the continuation of funding for DCR's conservation suite application. This basically is the engine that drives all the data that all of the districts provide to us on all the cost share practices and that feeds into the Chesapeake Bay model. So there's a total of the 30.3 of 4,350,000. And Kendall, if you go to the next slide. So basically what that leaves is a total of $26 million that then is transferred into the Natural Resources Commitment Fund and Reserve for Ag BMPs. And the breakout there is 18.2 million within the Bay watershed and 7.8 million outside the Bay watershed. In addition to this, now this is all from the 30.3 million from the Water Quality Improvement Fund statutory reserve. In addition, there is a new general fund deposit. Actually, it totals 13.55 million. I'll talk first about 9 million that's specifically put into the Natural Resource Conservation Commitment Fund, a total of $9 million, and that's broken again out into 6.3 within the Bay watershed and 2.7 outside. And so our goal here was to get to, y'all remember the study we did a couple years ago that you guys were a partner in, where we came up with this, that we need a $35 million minimum baseline. And so that was our goal, was to get to that $35 million baseline program. And so the big question you're all probably wondering is, what about technical assistance? Well, Kendall and I had talked back in the December where we realized that one of the problems with this budget being amended so many times is that there was language in the back in Part 4 that overrode language that was in our agency that created a lot of confusion. So here is the good news. the technical assistance funding base that we all fought so hard for of 4.55 million has been included. The strange thing is when you look in the introduced budget, normally stuff that changed is in italics. This one isn't, because it changed and then it unchanged and then it changed and now it's unchanged, which means it's back to what the budget says in paragraph A1 of item 373, where it says that there is now 4.55 million from the general fund in the second year. And our goal is that this is a base budget appropriation that hopefully goes forward into the next biennium. That has been the goal we worked all along, that we have a base level of technical assistance of the, and again, this came directly out of the recommendations of that study group, where we have, in a tough year, we have a $35 million program. And then we also have 4.5 million that is not coming out of that money that's set aside for the technical assistance. So that's something that all of our partners have been working together collectively, and let's hope that we finally we thought we had it over the finish line. Let's hope we can keep it over the finish line. A couple related items. Kendall, if you'll go to the next slide, please. You might recall that last year the General Assembly approved a position for us to have a lead dam safety engineer. We have 5 regional engineers to cover the entire state, not counting the engineers that we have working with the Soil and Water Conservation Division, specifically focused on district dams and state-owned, state park-owned dams. But so these 3 positions were actually in the budget approved by the General Assembly last year, and then they got unallotted through the process. And so in the governor's introduced budget, they have been restored for the lead dam safety engineer, as well as 2 floodplain planner positions. So we're hopeful that we can keep these in place. And of course, the $15 million that had been provided, that was restored during the special session for the rehab of the district dams. And the latest update I have on that is our Soil and Water Board meeting met a couple weeks ago, and the board has approved an approach for undertaking the rehabilitation of those. And so there will be more to come in the very near future as far as how we're going to roll out that money. And as I'm looking at Don Wells on the screen here, Don, as you know, $15 million sounds like a lot of money. It doesn't go very far. When you're talking about some of the scope of the projects that we have to undertake, but it is a huge step forward in us trying to address some of the district-owned dams that we know have significant challenges. I will also just note, as related to this, is, as you all know, we also still continue to have funding available for the remote monitoring equipment. I know several of the districts have been rolling that out, and we still have funding available to continue to move forward with the remote monitoring. As we've had incredible rain events. Michael, I heard you talking about how little rain you've had out there. If you need some, maybe we can ship some to you, because this is, in some localities in Virginia, is going to go on record as the wettest year ever. Here in the Richmond area, we're like, I think, the 3rd wettest ever. But we've really gotten to test some of those remote monitors as they're starting to be deployed to be able to get real-time data on what's happening with some of the dams out there. So Kendall, I believe that was my last slide, and I'd be happy to defer to Daryl or Russ if anybody has any questions.
I appreciate the slides and the information. We have a few questions that have been direct messaged to me. I believe you've actually just addressed one of the final ones I received about remote dam monitoring and a progress update. If you still have questions for that audience member, direct message me more, but those funds are still available, and if we need to talk further about that item, we can. I have a direct message question to me that is not a surprise, but perhaps actually one that's for Director Paylor and not just Director Cristman. I know you started talking a bit about that $1 million out of WQIF for the Clean Water Financing and Assistance Program. That's a new initiative that we all understand, and there was a question of wanting to understand the need and how that would be implemented. How we came to that decision as a carve off.
Dave, you want to jump on that?
Mr. Paylor, you're on. Thank you.
Excuse me. Yeah. I might need to, in terms of the mechanics of it, I might need to defer to Karen and let her get on. It was a piece of legislation last year based on some concerns that we had during that process, and I'm really not up to speed on how that's going to go forward. So if you want to have more, I think I saw that Karen's on, and you could let her unmute herself and chip in.
Absolutely, Karen. If you're available to come off mute, we'd love some additional feedback. If we can't make it happen here, I'll certainly follow up and find out some additional information to share. Okay. In the interim, while maybe she tries to figure out how to come off mute, I do have a couple other questions for Director Cristman still in the queue. The 4.55 million of TA, should districts anticipate the same allocation by the Soil and Water Board then this coming fiscal year?
Boy, that's a great question, Kendall. I guess my first reaction is we need to get the General Assembly to approve this first. So, I will defer to Daryl. I know that, we were using, I believe, 2013 as a base year. And I know that we've been looking at some adjustments. Daryl, can you add any more insight into that? Obviously, this will be something, assuming the General Assembly approves that the Soil and Water Board goes in. And I know we do have some members of the Soil and Water Board on. I should have recognized them as well in my earlier comments. But obviously the statute provides the authority to the Soil and Water Board to allocate all those funds, both operational and technical assistance, to the districts. And that is we usually have a 3-meeting process in March, April, and May, assuming the General Assembly is done, and that's when that process really kicks in. So it may be a little premature to answer that, but Daryl, anything that you'd like to add to that question?
Yes, sir. Good morning, everybody. As you may recall, our board set up a special subcommittee over a year ago, basically to address the issue of how to allocate base technical assistance. That's where the $4.55 million came from. And they agreed to reconvene that subcommittee every other year. So basically going into FY22, you would be looking at the same base technical assistance as in this year, FY21.
Thank you, Daryl. I think that's a good reminder of what I remember from that group's work also, is that it potentially could be every 2 years they take a review for that. And it does provide some certainty. Certainly we need to, as Director Cristman mentioned, get it through the General Assembly, but a better understanding the Soil and Water Board's process. And I think that answers more than one question I've seen in the chat box.
Kendall, I might just add on that too, that you might recall that the 4.55 is based on a minimal cost share program of 35 million. And then if there is funding above the $35 million level, then there's additional TA that is allocated with the additional cost share funds.
That's a great reminder and a great transition to the next question I have in the queue. The charts you showed on your slideshow, it does not take into account recordation money or the TA from that, does it?
Yeah, that's a great question, Kendall. So I was sort of focusing on what's new and different. And so what the good news there on the TA is that we still have the base level. I believe the base level appropriation is $10 million. As I recall, at the end of this past year, recordation ended up coming in a little bit above. The appropriation had been at 10 million. There was 1 year, I believe it was 2015, that we hit 11 million. Since then, it's been down. It's a very volatile revenue source based on real estate activity. Surprising to many people, 2020 has been a robust year in real estate transactions. And so, we got the FY21 we're in now. Daryl can help me. I believe we only allocated about 7.5 million. And we really have to wait until later in the year to see how that recordation revenue comes in, because it is sporadic and it is hard to predict. But for FY22, the appropriation remains the exact same in the introduced budget. There was no change to that. And so the real question becomes how the activity continues. So yes, you're correct in that. And as far as TA, I believe that still the language still sets a floor of 1.3 million, minimum of that. That goes towards TA, and then I think it goes or it goes to 13% if I'm not mistaken, if it's more than what we anticipate. But Daryl, anything? Do you remember how the recordation revenue ended up for last fiscal year? I know we ended up ahead of where we thought we were.
Yes, sir. It came in just over $9 million, which is an extremely high year based on recent history. And what we do periodically is, if there are excess funds, they go either to pilot projects or to reallocation, which of course the board just did a reallocation in December.
Excellent. Thank you, Daryl. I think that's a really good update and helpful information to bring that a little more clarity. I do want to circle back because I know Karen is able to come off mute now and see if she can help us address a bit further that question on the 1 million through WQIF to DEQ.
Hi there, Kendall. Can you hear me?
I can. Thank you so much.
All right. Hey, folks. I'm Karen Duran, and I manage the Clean Water Financing and Assistance Program. From what I understand, this was an initiative put forward by the Secretary, and it focuses on bioreactors. We have just now gotten word that we will be getting these funds, and so my team will be putting together a smaller team to determine how the pilot program will be implemented. So that will be coming probably the end of January. So we'll have more information for everyone on this in the coming months.
Thank you, Karen. I think that's certainly something we're going to be interested in as it develops further, and I can gladly talk to you offline about it also. I have 2 questions still in the chat box. Please keep them coming. Continue to drop them there, and we have some remaining time. The next 2 questions are actually for Director Cristman or perhaps Daryl Glover. One is actually in reference to the Virginia State University Small Farm Outreach Program that Director Cristman talked about. If there's some additional information about how that program would work and how districts can play a role in helping, that would be appreciated. And then the second question is, can any data, results, or credit or something be shared or used by any soil and water district towards their diversity goals, environmental justice? For example, the Virginia Soil and Water Employees Association did a diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative, and maybe the water quality deposits results or something can count toward an individual soil and water district's diversity goals. So there's a lot to unpack in that second part of the question, but the first is at least a little bit more information about what that new program would look like and how districts can play a role.
Yeah, again, I want to recognize that this was Daryl's creativity for proposing this. So I don't want to steal his thunder. I'll be happy to let Daryl answer that. And then Daryl, if you want to go ahead and let me just on the DEI question. DCR, one of the things I will mention, we established a Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee several years ago, and Rochelle Altsholtz, our Deputy Director of Administration and Finance, and Nathan Burrell, our Deputy Director for Government and Community Relations, are co-chairing our DEI efforts. And we are in the process of doing both internal and external program reviews. Internally looking at ourselves and seeing how we are doing and what strategies we can do as an agency to better diversify our staff, but then also looking at our program delivery and how we are providing equitable opportunities to a variety of constituent groups out in the Commonwealth. And I think that this funding for this small farm initiative and working with Virginia State is an example of directly looking at how we can better provide services to more diverse communities out there. So with that, Daryl, would you like to talk a little bit more about the concept?
Yes, sir. Thank you. What we're aiming to do is to utilize the existing resource of Virginia State University Small Farm Outreach Program, which was recommended to me when I started talking to some of our stakeholders about what could we do to outreach to farmers of color in order to ensure that they are well informed about the programs and services that DCR and soil and water conservation districts offer. And both several of our own existing small farm staff, as well as Virginia Farm Bureau and others, recommended that I meet with Mr. William Crutchfield at Virginia State, which I did. And I was not aware that they already had the type of infrastructure and organization that they have. They work all over the state using people who have worked in the agriculture community, either on the production or the conservation side, many of whom have retired and are now working part-time in the communities where they live. And so what we're aiming to do is to use those warm body contacts to perform outreach to farmers of color all over most of the state. We're looking at 52 counties in the state in order to inform them of the products and services that are available, to direct them to soil and water conservation districts, and to make them available to DCR staff to present to them in order to answer questions about programs and tell them how they can get assistance to increase their conservation. That $250,000, if it's approved, is a one-time funding over a 2-year period. And the other thing that the Small Farm Outreach Program will do is that they will use some of that money to do some demonstration projects and bring in farmers of colors and other small farmers, basically to see how BMPs are constructed and how they work and how they can benefit them. Kendall, could you repeat the second question?
I'm actually going to see if Frank Johnson wants to come off mute and clarify that part of it. I don't want to misconstrue some of his question that he tried to drop in the chat box directly to me. Frank, are you available?
Oh, yeah. Yes. Thank you so much. Can you hear me, Kendall, and everybody? Okay, great. Yes. Good morning. Yeah, Daryl, the Virginia Soil and Water Employees Association did a diversity, equity, and inclusion effort and initiative, and they put a lot of work into it. So some strategies or ideas that the districts are considering, for example, is to have concrete or specific goals around diversity, equity, or inclusion in their strategic plans. So the thought just came to my mind was that as the small farm outreach already has that existing database of outreach and engagement, and a lot of their territory is inherently in a soil and water district, I was just wondering if, for example, some of the results or data or something like that possibly can be shared and or used with those districts towards their strategic planning, goals or objectives that they might have involving diversity, equity, or inclusion, or just something, another way to say, here's a way to get this done, so to speak.
Frank, I think this would probably be a long back and forth discussion between us. Can we maybe arrange for a conference call with you and others that are involved with this? I would say in general for districts, although you're not able to give special benefit to farmers of color in administering the VAX program, we have for many years, promoted new participants through your cost share and technical assistance grant agreements. And so that is an opportunity using that to to make some special efforts toward getting farmers of color to sign up for cost share.
Okay, thank you. Yes, that's fine. We can do that.
Thank you, Daryl. I think that's going to be a conversation that's going to continue on, and I look forward to being a part of it and helping with that too, Frank. I have a couple additional questions. One from Mr. Bill Fleming with Virginia Dare Soil and Water. What is the criteria that defines a small farm versus other farms?
Yeah, that's been an ongoing discussion for a long time. And I can't really give you a specific acreage limit on that, but basically what we're trying to do is, we already have a small farm nutrient management program. We have 2 Virginia State contract employees, one works in the east and one in the west. But, with just 2 people, we're not able to really reach even though they're doing a great work and have for a number of years, we're not able to reach the number of farmers of color and other disadvantaged groups that there are in the state. So that's why we feel by utilizing and partnering with the Virginia State University Small Farm Outreach Program to ensure that these farmers are better informed, we can direct them back to soil and water conservation districts and to our own staff if that's appropriate for nutrient management, for example, so that they can participate and get more conservation on the ground.
Thank you. I think that's well said. I have at this time one question left in the chat box, and we luckily have a few more minutes before wrapping up. The final question in the chat box is of this moment is, as related to the VAX program, what is the potential for reinstating mini grants for innovative BMPs? This program was part of the VAX program many years ago. Several of our current BMPs were developed out of the mini grant program, and this was submitted by Keith Burgess of Monacan Soil and Water.
We haven't discussed mini grants in a few years. In the past couple of years, as all of the district people know, we've tended more toward focused pilot projects to promote, for example, a whole farm approach, which has been extremely successful in Three Rivers, and we're hoping to expand through grant opportunities into TJ. We've done the RMP pilot projects like in the Northern Neck. We've got some special grants through EPA. We've got a supplemental grant through EPA to do direct pay nutrient management out in the Valley. We just received final approval of the Most Effective Basin Chesapeake Bay grant for the Northern Neck Great Wicomico Basin and the Bayside of the Eastern Shore to do various things, including RMPs and whole farm approach and erosion mediation. So that's really, kind of what our focus has been over the past couple of years. And the other thing I would say regarding soil health, we have one of our nutrient management specialists in Warrington office, Robert Shoemaker, working with Rory McGuire, Virginia Tech, on their 3-year research project that we hope will help us to develop a soil health BMP bundle by the time that research is completed. So that's really been more of our direction the past couple of years.
Thank you. At this time, I don't believe I have any further questions in the chat box. If I have inadvertently skipped over one, please stop me now and come off mute. We have about 5-6 minutes left, and I encourage you to take advantage of the remaining time that we have. I speak too fast. Laura Grape with Northern Virginia has said, would you please provide an update on the status or continuation of coordinated programs that support equine operators?
We have pursued a grant with MIFWIF in order to do a project in John Marshall on horses. That was not successful. And what we are doing now is we are doing some searching around for other possible grant sources to potentially do some sort of equine project. But right now, we took a bit of a setback, because we thought we were going to be successful with that grant application.
Thank you, Daryl. I hope that helps Laura a little bit in an update on that front. I believe I have a question both from Frida Cathcart, but also Jonathan Lyle. And Jonathan, I'm not sure you're able to come off mute, but did you want to ask about water quality monitoring? All right, I will move to Frida's question and circle back with Mr. Lyle and see if I can get a little bit more information on that. Ms. Cathcart's question is, how is the state monitoring and addressing non-point source pollution? It's a broad question that I hope maybe Daryl or Clyde, you can help tackle also, or any of our speakers at this point also. With about 5 minutes left, I open it to all of our speakers for questions, answers, and any questions that remain.
I'm glad to see that Mr. Paylor came off mute, because I was going to defer to him because water quality monitoring is more his bailiwick. So, David?
Well, it's a pretty broad question, and let me just start by saying I apologize. I've got to get off in 3 minutes. for another call. But you know, we have a number of permitting programs for construction of all kinds of facilities. We have compliance inspections that have to be required for that. Our monitoring programs, you know, in terms of the water quality monitoring per se, we have routine sort of trend monitoring that we do across the state, where we've been going to every site for years and years to look at trend monitoring. Each year we come up with a new monitoring plan that causes us to look at new areas of monitoring that we haven't done before, and when we monitor for all manner of parameters. It'll vary from one site to another. So we have a fairly extensive monitoring program to the extent that Ms. Cathcart is talking about construction. That you know, is sort of done on a compliance basis through our inspections that we do based on permits that we have. So that's probably the best I can do as an overview. There's a lot more to it than that.
Absolutely. I appreciate the overview. With this, I'll wrap up our session. I thank you to all 4 of our presenters for taking time out this morning, providing us an update, and really giving us plenty to think about and homework for many of you as we head into the General Assembly session that starts next Wednesday. I hope, if you have not, again, registered for the session tomorrow on legislative outreach efforts, we'll be hearing from Delegate Ken Plum. We'll be talking about how we move forward our own legislative agenda, but we'll also be addressing some of the questions you've submitted about the budget process itself, how a bill becomes a law, how we draft our own legislative agenda, and how we can maybe make an impact in a virtual world, but also in a world when we can eventually be back in the same building together. So don't miss that. We'll take a lot of the information we learned today and really move it into the conversation then. I see a few questions dropping into the chat box. I apologize, our time is at an end, but we will certainly take those questions and actually follow up with our speakers and make sure we have answers for you at the end of the day. And also can gladly tackle these tomorrow too, if necessary, during our legislative session. So again, thank you, Happy New Year, and I really do look forward to connecting with you again in a virtual format until we can be together in person. Thank you, guys.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Bye all.
Thank you. Take care.